For those of you who have been with us all afternoon, I hope you agree that was an incredible discussion. And please join me in again thanking Frank, Sabrina, and Bob for their contributions to the day. It is now my pleasure to introduce the next public health challenge that we will be seeking solutions to this afternoon. A reminder to any of you who have joined us that we are recording this session, and when we do reach a point where there's participation, if you speak, please to use the mics. Across the globe, an estimated 62 million girls fail to reach their full potential because they are denied the right to an education. It is no secret that women are more likely to get jobs and earn more with a basic education. Providing women with access to education also reduces poverty and leaves them much less vulnerable to violence. Data from the organization CARE estimates that in some countries, more than $1 billion a year is lost to the economy because of the failure to educate girls to the same level as boys. Girl Rising is a global campaign that is working to change that by advancing girls' education and empowerment. It leverages powerful media tools to change the way people think about and support girls and girls' education. You will hear more about this powerful movement from Professor Amita Vyas and our distinguished panelists, but first, we wanted to share a video from the Girl Rising Project.
Tonight, one of the bravest girls in the world.
Malala Yousafzai became renowned for demanding girls be given the right to education.
Shot in the head on her school bus.
She was a student who wanted to learn, but now she's fighting to live.
Come on, skinny love, just last the year. Poor little soul, we were never here.
I was 11 years old when my father arranged for me to be married.
Staring at the sink of
تروح المدرسة؟
لا.
I had heard about the thousands of girls sold to men in those places.
I can't really talk about everything that happened to me here, but I will never forget. We have come to this house, the house of her master, to say, you must set her free.
Regrets collect like old friends, here to relive your darkest moments. I can see no way, I can see no way, and all of the ghouls come out to play.
There is no miracle here, just a girl with dreams.
I will read, I will study, I will learn. If you try to stop me, I will just try harder. If you stop me, there will be other girls who rise up and take my place. I am change.
I am my own master now. I feel as though I have power.
Now there's nothing to stop.
I feel I can do anything.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Girl Rising, Investing in Our Global Future, in Our Global Treasure. As you saw in that incredibly powerful trailer, adolescent girls have big dreams, and their well-being is integral to our global economy and to our global public health. So let's just think for a minute, why are girls and women so important to advancing public health? And let's think specifically about adolescent girls. Adolescent girls who drop out of school are likely to get married early, likely to have a child way too early, likely to be infected by HIV, likely to suffer from gender-based violence, and maternal death. Quite literally, when an adolescent turns 13, when a girl turns 13 years old, her life becomes dangerous. And it is an incredible opportunity for us to invest in her, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because we know that it's great, it is good for our global economy, for prosperity, for peace, and for global health. So today, I bring to you this esteemed panel of people who are literally transforming the world for girls and women, and who know that to do that, you need invaluable partnerships. We need philanthropists, we need corporations, we need NGOs, we need academics. It takes all of us to build this movement. So today it is my great pleasure to introduce to all of you Christina Lowery. Christina is the CEO of Girl Rising, and you'll have to excuse me, I have to actually read everyone's bios because they're so impressive. I want to make sure I get this right. She has been with Girl Rising since the inception of Girl Rising, and she is incredibly passionate about storytelling and the use of storytelling for social change. Christina has contributed to and produced many films as well as television for CNN, ABC, Bill Moyers, Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, and the list goes on and on and on. And Girl Rising is so grateful to have Christina at its helm. So Christina, this trailer that we all watched, and I think I have watched this now about 400 times, and I still have the same reaction as from the first time I saw this trailer. It is so powerful. Tell us how stories and storytelling is changing the world for girls, and tell us a little bit about Girl Rising's impact since the launch of this incredible film.
Thank you, Amita, and thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I also have seen this 400 or 800 times, and it still gets me every time, too. Girl Rising was founded on the principle that stories can be a powerful and practical way to affect change in the world. And I'll tell you just a very brief bit about why this project ever came to be. About 8 years ago, we, a small group of filmmakers and journalists, were researching a project on how to end global poverty. And as part of that research, we talked to experts and practitioners across the development sector in HIV/AIDS, in clean water, in agriculture, in maternal and child health, in education, you name it. And what we heard really surprised us. No matter who we spoke to, they all said somewhere in their list of top 5 things that needed to happen to improve outcomes in that sector was, well, really, you have to get girls in school and keep them there. And we thought, that's interesting. And when we went and looked at the data coming out of girls' education, we were really astounded. You mentioned some of them before, but there is a mountain of undeniable evidence that points to the fact that educating and empowering girls is, in fact, the single best investment we can make to end poverty, the single best investment for public health. So we, as filmmakers and journalists, knew very well the power of media and stories to educate, to inspire, to change the way people think, and ultimately change the way they act, to create a groundswell of support for an issue. So we decided that we had to do that for this topic. So we decided to make a film, a high-profile, creative, beautiful, inspiring film that would tell 9 stories of 9 girls, real girls, ordinary girls from around the world, each that were overcoming a barrier to education. And we made that the heart and soul of a campaign. We all knew the life cycle of films too well to know that if we just made a film and put it out there, that it wouldn't actually have the traction that we wanted it to. We wanted this to be a vehicle for change and to not just educate people about it, but to inspire them to think differently and to catalyze action and catalyze investment for girls. So the film came out a few years ago, and it has, in fact, done that. It has reached millions of people. It has inspired thousands of incredibly creative actions to support girls. It's raised millions of dollars to support girls' programming and awareness efforts. And around the same time that the film came out in this country, we had the opportunity to take the film and campaign to India, Northern Nigeria, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And we always had dreamed of taking this film that we made to the kinds of places where we found the girls that are featured, to see, can we actually use stories and media in these places to move the needle for girls? And so in each of those places, we architected campaigns that had a couple of key components. One was a mass media campaign. So in India, we remade the original film in Hindi with 10 Bollywood stars. In Northern Nigeria, we kind of ripped the film apart and took 6 of the original stories and made 6 new stories about Northern Nigerian girls and created Hausa language video modules and put those on television. And we did something similar also in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. A second component of our work in each of these countries was to transform those tools into practical, useful tools that nonprofits and schools could use in their programs. So one example is in India, we made a 24-part gender sensitization curriculum for 6th and 7th grade boys and girls that's rolling out to 40,000 students this fall. So there's a lot of detail about what's happened, but to talk about the impact, I can say that we have seen measurable change in how parents, what they aspire for their daughter's education, measurable change in girls' feelings of self-efficacy in viewing this and going through a program with curriculum materials that we've created. Teachers change their teaching practices, religious leaders speaking up about educating girls in their communities. So we see impact across the board, not just with girls, but critically for us as Girl Rising, we also really think about the gatekeepers to girls and how to change how they are supporting girls. Much of our work is focused around the world, overseas in the developing world, but we also have a U.S. educator program, and we've turned these tools into curriculum and practical ways for teachers in this country to engage their students on what it means to be an active global citizen, to, of course, learn about the issues that girls are facing, but also to practice and explore what it means to make a difference in the world. And I'm thrilled to be sitting up here with Candi from Citi, a new partner of Girl Rising that's helping us expand our U.S. educator program, which we'll get to some more specifics in a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. And now to you, Kate. Kate Roberts, who's also my British sister. I've known Kate for a very long time, and it's been an honor all of these years, more than a decade, to have been working with you. Kate is the co-founder of the Maverick Collective, which she will tell you all about. She's also the senior vice president at Population Services International. Her focus is on corporate partnerships and philanthropy. In 2007, Kate was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum, and she currently serves on their Global Health Advisory Board and is curating Global Shapers for the World Economic Forum. In 2009, Vogue named Kate as one of their 100 women. And in 2016, Foreign Policy magazine named both Kate and the Crown Princess of Norway as 2 of their top 100 global thinkers. And I should add that the Crown Princess of Norway and Melinda Gates are co-founders of the Maverick Collective with Kate. So Kate, we've made lots of strides, right, for girls and women. And yet, there are 130 million girls still missing from classrooms. We know there are 220 million women who want to avoid pregnancy but don't have access to reliable methods of family planning. We know that 300,000 women die every year in childbirth. We see rates of cervical cancer increasing. These are big, big numbers. We still have a long way to go. So tell us, how do we need to sort of shift the paradigm in thinking about private capital to innovate for girls and women, and the work that you're doing with Maverick?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would like to say that health and education obviously intersects very closely in order to reach these goals of keeping girls in school. If you're not healthy, you can't go to school. If you basically don't get an education, we're not going to end extreme poverty as we know it. It's as simple as that. We also know that if we invest in girls and women, we can strengthen local communities, we can strengthen nations, and we can ultimately make this world a much stronger economy and a better place. So Melinda and myself and the Crown Princess of Norway started Maverick Collective actually at the same time that the Girl Effect video came out. And it was at the time that Girl Rising, the Girl Effect, all of this incredible advocacy and storytelling started to happen around girls and women. And I was, as Amita said, I started my journey as a young global leader, attending conferences like Davos and the Clinton Global Initiative. And there was just no real speak about the real issues that girls and women are facing. They were sort of clouded around, and everyone shirted around the issue of actually what girls and women really needed was access to contraception, education, sanitation. You know, there's 1 billion people around the world who do not have simple access to a toilet. So it's a major barrier of girls going to school. The United Nations has set the new goals. They're called the Sustainable Development Goals. There's actually 17 of them. They're extremely aggressive. And we need $3 trillion extra now to what is already committed to these goals to actually reach these goals. Now, as I'm sure you all know, that large governments, there's funds like the Global Fund, there's USAID, there's the British government, there's various large pots of money to help us to achieve these goals. But really, if we're going to be able to achieve them now, we have to start innovating and doing things a little differently. And that's one of the reasons that Maverick Collective was established. We need mavericks. We need to start thinking about these problems in a maverick way collectively. If philanthropists and governments and the private sector and banks and civil society do not work effectively together, we're not going to achieve these goals. And so Maverick Collective was established really to start innovating. Now, we're going to see the end of polio in our lifetime due to a lot of the work that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Bill specifically, has done on this issue. We're probably going to be able to end malaria. An AIDS-free generation is in our sights. You know, these are all huge barriers to girls going to school. And the reason that we've done it is we've been able to really innovate, to try to find simple solutions. Simple things like using a condom, putting a bed net over a bed to protect yourself from malaria. You know, one of the big issues that girls don't go to school is they don't have access to menstrual hygiene products. And, you know, guess what? Every girl has a period. Why are there not menstrual hygiene products available around the world? So really, if we can innovate to find these solutions and then take this measured impact, take the actual effect of some of these programs to the big partners like the Global Fund and USAID. And in this changing world that we're in, certainly politically right now, to really scale up some of these winning solutions. And that's why Maverick Collective exists. We are changing the way that philanthropy is being done, especially with women philanthropists. It's an all-women group right now. I'm sorry, but where are the men? Like, we need the men. If we're going to change issues affecting girls and women, how powerful is it that a man stands up and talks about these issues? From the beginning of time, it's been women who've been talking about these issues. So Maverick Collective right now is an all-woman group. And so I'm definitely challenging the men to come forward and help us with some of these issues. So that in a nutshell.
Tell us a little bit about the model and who your Mavericks are.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So of course it was started by myself and Melinda and the Crown Princess. And we had this notion, it was really modeled on Melinda. You know, Bill and Melinda give away $7 billion a year away, right? Of course, nobody can do that. They're the richest family in the world. But we thought on a smaller level, wouldn't it be cool to have philanthropists get involved beyond the checkbook? You know, people get rich for a reason. They're successful business people, and we need business solutions now to help solve some of these problems. So the model is to invest in a pilot project somewhere around the world, and our Mavericks are from all over the world, from different backgrounds, bringing different solutions to the table, different brain power, and they give their time as well as treasure and talent to the table to help us to really innovate and solve some of these problems that we're facing around the world. We then take the results to our existing partners, and our partners, whether it be local governments or large funds, a lot of social enterprise so that we don't have to continually rely on aid, then are put into place. With the goal that, you know, every girl should have perfect health, a future, financial security, and a good education.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. So Kate's been talking about philanthropy. There's also a lot more attention that's being paid by corporations. Corporations that really want to align their brands to causes for girls and women, as well as investing corporate social responsibility dollars into issues for girls and women. And it is our pleasure to have with us today Candi Wolff. Candi is Citi's Executive Vice President and Head of Global Government Affairs. Prior to joining Citi in May 2011, Candi was a partner in the legislative and policy practice at the law firm of Hogan Lovells. And her private sector experience also includes time as a partner at the Washington Counsel Ernst & Young and an associate in public policy and law for Aiken Gump, the law firm. Candi has more than 20 years of experience in government, and most notably, between January 2005 and December 2007, she served in the White House as the Assistant to the President for Legislative Affairs. She is the first female to ever have held that position. So you truly are girl rising, Candi. Thank you. As President George W. Bush's principal liaison to Congress, she really had the primary responsibility for formulating and advocating the president's agenda in Congress. And we take great pride in having Candi with us today because she is also an alum of the George Washington University Law School. So welcome. Thank you. Welcome back, Candi, to campus. Welcome to GW once again.
I say, even though I live in the DC area and I come by, I'm always astounded by the amount of construction work that's been done, even from my days a while back from law school. So thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. We would love to hear about Citi's work around girls and women, and really your commitment to gender equality and how you see this as part of the corporate vision for Citi.
Well, first, maybe to step back for a minute, you know, I think as you said, Amita, that you see corporate social responsibility, but also really there's been a shift around how corporations think about investment. Mm-hmm. It's not simply just giving grant money anymore. It's really evolved into what is the business proposition around the investment that corporations are making in their people, in the communities, and how do you really have that business link? And so we have different goals, but one important goal that we have around our model is the ability to enable progress, because we are the largest global bank. We are the largest U.S. global bank. We're in 96 countries, 98 countries where we do business, and 160 some. 98 where we have presence, and 160 some where we do business. And so, as we look around those communities, the question is, what's the best way to get involved? And probably, I guess it was 2015, we put out a report. And the report looked at women and the importance of women in the economy And the need, as we look out in the decades to come, the role that women will play in economic growth, what they already engage in. We know, right, that there's direct links, as we've said, between labor participation and education level. And in terms of where the population is going and women live longer, they're going to be the generators of global growth. And so if you look at that and say, well, we look at it from a client perspective, but we're also looking at it just generally, how do we empower women and engage women? And so we've looked at a variety of different programs, and our most recent one that we're very excited to participate in is Girl Rising, because it's that connection to the education and the ability to get into the labor force and to promote women and women empowerment. And you know, we'll have other programs that we look at. I mean, we're in financial services. There's still a continued effort to get more women to be at the highest levels in financial services, and work to be done, and we spend a lot of time internally. But I think it's equally as important from a company perspective to look externally, both working with clients and engaging them in these programs, as well as ourselves investing in communities and figuring out how do we empower women. Girl Rising is one. The other program that we've really undertaken too is around youth unemployment, and this links to that. As we know, in our cities, there's a huge level of unemployment for young people, disproportionate to what the economy and job market is showing, and that's true across the globe. And so we've taken on an initiative to do more with underprivileged youth to try to rise up, and this fits into that link about educating, empowering, and then being able to link them and hope that we have better global citizens and a strong workforce and economic growth for the future.
Thank you. Christina, can you tell us a little bit about the partnership with Citi and the program itself that Citi's been supporting and investing in with Girl Rising?
I'd be delighted to. It's very exciting for us. So the partnership with Citi has allowed Girl Rising to expand our U.S. educator program in a couple of really important ways. One, we've been able to add critical new modules, financial empowerment modules, to the curriculum. We also are expanding, doing more outreach so we can find more teachers to utilize this material. And we're conducting a couple of deep pilots, one in Houston to 700 students, high school students across 11 schools, and one in Tampa serving underserved adolescent girls. And one of the things that's really exciting for us is that our U.S. educator program is not something that's directed at girls. Right? What we're trying to do, and what teachers tell us is so useful about these materials, is that we are trying to engage youth in this country to both understand life outside these borders and what girls are facing around the world, but also to help them develop tools and critical skills for their own toolkit in life to be empowered citizens of the world. So the Girl Rising curriculum allows for certain specific skill development, like these new added financial module, financial empowerment curriculums, which was developed by GW's Financial Excellence Center, happy to say. But also, as I said before, to help them understand what it means to be an active global citizen, to practice what that means, to gain a perspective on their own education, to gain a sense of what it means to make a difference in the world. So, for us at Girl Rising, partnerships have been key from the very beginning. And as Kate was saying, it is the ecosystem of partners that must come together. If what we're ultimately trying to do is create a new normal for girls, for it to be normal for girls to be healthy and invested in and respected for their potential, and normal for girls to be educated, then we need all different kinds of partners, from corporations to people who are creating new narratives about girls, to private philanthropists, to academic institutions. So for us, our partnership with Citi really points to, and our partnerships with corporations are the lifeblood of what we're doing, because it allows us to expand and to reach more people.
That's great. That really is such a wonderful example of a partnership between Girl Rising and a corporation, both who are really invested in this issue for women and girls. So Kate, can you give us some examples of some of the Maverick projects out there and focus particularly on public health and the impact that they're having?
Sure. Well, actually, I'll tell you a little story. I know it's the School of Public Health, so I'm allowed to talk about these things. But one of the very successful public health success stories that we were very much part of from the very beginning is around HIV/AIDS prevention. And in the early days, about 8 years ago, we had been approached by a couple of our partners who told us that if we were to circumcise adult African men, they would be 60% less likely to contract HIV or pass it on. And we could not get any of our regular donors to fund this because they said to us, you'll never get grown African men into a clinic to get circumcised. So I decided to raise the capital. I raised $400,000 through private sources and set up a clinic in Zambia to circumcise adult African men. And so we started off, because it's about behavior change at the end of the day, right? Men are not circumcised in Africa, and they never have been. Over thousands of years, never been circumcised. So we had the really hard job of trying to convince African men to get circumcised. So we put out a campaign, you won't get HIV. Crickets, nobody turned up. Second message, talk about storytelling and narrative, was, well, it's the right thing to do for your woman. Nobody turned up. Shocker. And so we were about to pack up and go home, and we put a message out, which is true, that you would be a better lover. African men lining up at the clinic. So we very quickly circumcised 1,000 men. And true story, this is a true story. Bill Gates came along, visited the clinic, and he said, this is marvelous innovation. I'm going to give you $50 million to do this across 6 African countries. Today, it is still our innovation, but multiple other NGOs, governments, big donors have joined forces. It's a $400 million campaign across sub-Saharan Africa. Men are getting circumcised. And this model of shared responsibility, behavior change, looking into the culture. Like there was, you know, in Nepal, girls during their menstruation go into cow sheds and are locked up for a week. They suffocate to death sometimes because it's the time of the month. And God forbid, you know, not even talking about going to school. They are locked up in cow sheds. So these are cultural barriers that we have to address. And I talk about innovation all the time because you know, it's like the male circumcision story. It's going to be, it is one of our leading tools to end HIV now in our generation. So another really good example of a Maverick project today is around cervical cancer. So one of our Mavericks, she's a lawyer, her name's Vyas, came to us on a trip to Myanmar and witnessed a woman die of cervical cancer in a hut in Myanmar, on the floor, in immense pain. It's a horrible way to die, and it's completely preventable. And we had, again, gotten a call from the CDC saying, hey guys, if you dab household white vinegar on a woman's cervix, you can detect early signs of cervical cancer. And then we can just freeze it off. That costs a cent to do, household white vinegar. And so, of course, we had to pilot this. We tried it in Myanmar, and we tried it in India. We took the results after about a year to the Indian government, and they said, this is amazing. We're going to do this across all of our public sector clinics across India. We're now reaching 24 million women with this cervical cancer screening and treatment. There is no reason to die. And if we just continue to use private capital to act as sort of like the VC, the venture capital of innovation, it's where organizations like Citi and philanthropists and the corporate sector can come in to really help us to solve some of these problems that have to be simple, right? We're not looking for the next silver bullet here. It's simple solutions that can ultimately lead to empowering girls and women to be healthy and to be in school. It's as simple as that. This is not hard. We just have to make it happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Christina, we talked a lot today about sort of new models and new innovations, both in thinking about philanthropy and corporate investments in girls and women. Can you give us sort of the hot news right off the press, like what is Girl Rising going to do next? What is Girl Rising going to do in this sort of changing landscape for adolescent girls today? What's on the horizon?
Well, it's interesting because it is such a different time than when we set out almost 9 years ago to make the film. 9 years ago, people weren't talking as much about girls' education. It was before Malala was shot. It was before the former First Lady was doing carpool karaoke about girls' education. It was not front and center. My friends weren't talking about it. And things have changed. I think the statistic now is nearly 2/3 of countries have reached gender parity in primary schools. And yet, as you said, Amita, there are 130 million girls missing from classrooms. So we at Girl Rising are gearing up for another major new media campaign. We aim to focus in on some of the stories that we weren't able to tell in the first film, and ones that are pressing right now. Some that I can think of are the link between girls' education and climate change, for whoever was here in the previous discussion. The situation, the unique situation that girls in refugee settings are facing in this crisis that we have today. There are many reasons that we talked about of girls dropping out of secondary school, early marriage, menstruation, violence. Those are all ones that we want to talk about. And critically, also Girl Rising wants to highlight other important drivers of girls' empowerment. And just 2 weeks ago, we announced a new campaign that will be coming a year from now around girls' empowerment through sports. With our first 2 partners on that campaign being Aquafina and the General Sports Authority of Saudi Arabia. So we're really excited to pick up also and highlight for the world other important drivers of girls' empowerment, and to use, as we have from the beginning, media and storytelling to not just change the way people think, but to catalyze action and catalyze investment in girls.
That's so great. Congratulations. That is really phenomenal. And we here at GW are very proud. We here at GW are very proud because we also have a partnership with Girl Rising to work with them on launching campaigns and really measuring impact. And so it's very exciting for many of the students who are here in the audience today who are already working on different Girl Rising projects. And we really do see this as central to our work as a School of Public Health.
And I will say that GW has been a phenomenal partner to Girl Rising in helping us particularly crack this nut of how do we measure this impact, in addition to helping us research and delve into new campaigns.
And it's incredible to have these new partnerships with Aquafina and Pepsi, who are really getting on board in a place like Saudi Arabia. So, kudos to you and the entire Girl Rising team. And Candi, sort of, again, talking about partnerships, tell us how examples of your partnership with Girl Rising, how is it so valuable to the work that you do as Executive Vice President for Global Affairs?
Yeah, you're being polite, because what I do is lobbying, right? And I'm in the swamp. We're all in the swamp. But with all seriousness, these types of projects, in addition to important investments for Citi in terms of commitments to communities, one of the reasons that we were picking some of the areas and really wanted to invest in places like Houston and in Tampa, because you asked, well, why those locations? When I look at, okay, I think I'm back on, at Citi's footprint, right, we're a large New York-based bank. We're viewed as Wall Street. What you don't realize is that more than 2/3 of our employees are outside of New York. The second largest state for employees for Citi is Texas. The third largest is Florida. And only by a small number. At some point, Florida and or Texas is likely to exceed New York. And yet you would never know that we had a footprint because we don't have retail. You're not seeing some big sign that says Citi. You can't go to an ATM machine. These are just employees who work on behalf of the company. And we want to be able to give back to the communities. And so when you talk about the stories that are being told here, I want to tell the stories to the local politicians. I want to tell the stories to the federal politicians. I want to tell them that these are people who are committed to the community and how we're supporting it, whether we're supporting it through Girl Rising or whether we're going to do it because we have volunteers who go in and spend endless hours giving back to the community around projects. And so how we link that and the stories that are being told are stories that are important for what I do. And so that is a subpart. That is not the rationale for why we do the investment, but it is this part that we want to take, advantage of, if you will. And that, I think, also helps to highlight for trying to showcase and expand, the visibility of these programs. If we can point to the pilot programs, if we can use them as talking points as we're going in, then local officials are going to start to recognize them. There's going to be an additional push that can be made at the local levels where there's, an awareness with the education folks. So there's a way for us to use what resources we have and the investment that we've made and the outreach we do with respect to the governments to try to link those. And that, I hope, as we start to engage more, actively, can help raise the profile on a lot of these programs and get the government officials to be more committed and be more supportive with the educators.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I would love to open it up to questions from the audience. We've got an amazing audience here with lots of people doing lots of, I'm sure, interesting things. So we need to use the mics for questions so that people who are watching us virtually can hear you. So yeah, please, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Shami Fanglass. I'm a doctor nearby. My question is actually for Ms. Roberts. So through Maverick, do you all partner with other large philanthropic women's groups moving things? So for example, Women Moving Millions, there are some others, and I'm just curious to know how you set that up.
Yeah, really good question. The simple answer is absolutely yes. We partner with Women Moving Millions. We're not really a club of rich women. We're a collective of sort of maverick business leaders, women philanthropists, who don't just want to give money to an issue. They really want to go to the field. When you become a maverick, you actually co-create a project with us, and we use our existing infrastructure with PSI, which is the global health organization that implements the programs. We then partner with other NGOs on the ground. So one really good example would be a lady called, in fact, she's involved with Girl Rising as well, Indrani Goradia. She's one of our founding members. She's gotten behind gender-based violence eradication in India, which is one of our pillars. She's a member of Women Moving Millions, as well as a founding member of Maverick Collective, and she uses her skills to build capacity. And her project in India is a collaboration of many different NGOs to build that. Not just, one of my pet peeves in this business, because it is a business, is reinvention of the wheel, where people start new projects and then resources are wasted. It's really about collaborating together with civil society and the private sector and governments to scale these solutions across multiple NGOs and governments and the private sector, and for us to find solutions. And so partnership is so key. We've all talked about it. We're just not going to move the needle unless we partner and stop reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. And partnerships, the other piece of this in terms of partnerships are influencers, right? So whether, again, there are political leaders and policymakers, but celebrities as well. And both Kate and Christina, you have a rich history of working with celebrities. Christina, tell us a little bit about the work in India and how you were able to engage influencers and how that's really amplified the work that's been done there.
Yeah, from the very beginning, as I said, partnerships of all kind have been at the core of what Girl Rising does. And when we first set out to make this film, we knew that we wanted high profile, the best talent in the world to voice it. Not just because it would draw attention to the project, but because we knew they would do an amazing job. But I will admit, we were crossing our fingers behind our back when we would say, and Meryl Streep is going to voice this at first. But in fact, she was the first person that agreed to voice it, and then it was sort of smooth sailing from there. When we went into India, there were sort of two different sets of influencers that we were looking at. One was beloved public influencers. Who are the people that girls and boys look up to and pay attention to what they say on their Twitter feed? And Bollywood celebrities are some of those people. So we knew going in that we wanted it to be very high profile, to be able to cut through the noise of media that's put out there. So we were lucky enough, two of our original actors that were part of the original film, Frida Pinto and Priyanka Chopra, really helped us develop a network of celebrity talent. We then expanded more and got sports stars involved and additional celebrities who were not part of the original film. And then we also were lucky enough when we went into India to meet with Prime Minister Modi. And that led to a partnership with the Indian government, with the Ministry of Women and Child Development, which again served as a critical amplifier for our work. We ended up in partnership creating public service announcements that the Indian government then put millions of dollars to put across thousands of movie theaters and every major television channel. And we've followed that model in all of our countries, where we think about who are the public influencers that both can, that the public is going to pay attention to, that young adolescent girls and boys and their parents are listening to, and who are the influencers that can help us amplify the message. And corporate leaders also in India were a key influencer that we honed in on, thinking in how can we make sure that this message is going to the business sector as well. Because the other thing that we haven't talked about in terms of the importance of companies being involved is that companies, as you mentioned, have workforces all over the world. Yeah. And those workforces are often parents. You know, they are gatekeepers also of their own children and making decisions about their children. And critically, they are going to be the places that educated girls will one day need to work. Right? So it's critical that companies also are on board and really supportive of girls' education and girls' empowerment efforts.
Absolutely, and I think what's so unique about Girl Rising is that there are millions of NGOs on the ground, really solid ones, like Population Services International, that are innovating, that are creating products, that are building schools, providing health services. But unless we, as you said earlier, really create a new normal for girls, those efforts won't have the impact that we want to see on the ground. And so using media, using these powerful influencers really helps to not just bring visibility to the issue, but as you said, starts changing social norms at either national, global, even at the local level as well. So I have made lots of comments, and I said I would open it up to questions. Dr. Tilsch over here. Gayatri? I should also introduce that Gayatri worked this past summer through a fellowship, the NAP fellowship here at GW for Girl Rising India. So.
Well, this is a question that builds on a couple of comments, and this is to Ms. Roberts and Ms. Wolff, and that's speaking of not reinventing the wheel. As we think about impact investing and corporate engagement in these models, are there kind of corporate best practices for getting corporations engaged in these kinds of community-based social impact investing models? or are the corporations all inventing it all again?
Do you want to speak to reaching out in terms of how you've done it? I mean, I can speak maybe for a minute. There's a lot of conversation around that, a lot of classes now. I was actually speaking at not GW Business School, but there's more efforts to kind of look at what those best practices are and really kind of looking at the new models for corporate social responsibility and the fact that corporations have moved much more into the business proposition. So I would say I don't think that all corporations have moved in that direction, but those that have, when you look at it, you have to look then at what the company's doing and how it links to the business proposition. Mm-hmm. And so who you might reach out to in terms of engaging for support may depend and shift depending on what that business proposition is. 1 year you might have been able to go if it was just a grant program, but is that the core of what a company stands for or wants to support? So it makes a lot of sense for Citi because of women in economic growth and our global footprint to have that conversation. It may not to someone else who's potentially less global. I mean, always gender should be there from a diversity, but I think as the model begins to shift, as best practices really turn to much more of a connection, I think what you're finding is that there will be best practices, but I'm not sure that I can I'm not the expert, let's put it that way. There are probably others who can say that there's some models that have worked particularly well, but I do think the shift in and of itself is to much more of a business connection.
So I have quite a few thoughts on this. I mean, shocker. But I think that it's absolutely time for corporations to put the CSR into the P&L. And it shouldn't be about aid and grant making anymore. And the other pet peeve that I have is and I work with a lot of large corporations where we're sort of singing their tune instead of having them listen to what is really going to move the needle on these issues. And so I think that as we move into less aid, as we should be doing, it's not about dropping rice sacks from airplanes onto the runway anymore. It's about looking for sustainable solutions that's going to build capacity locally in the countries to survive without aid. And the private sector has a huge role to play in this. And we are absolutely, Mavericks wanted, basically. We're looking for brain power to help us think through these models of impact investing. And impact investing is such a sexy word right now, but what does it really mean? And is it really working? And I feel like we need to take a couple of steps back and look at how we reimagine social enterprise. And, my organization alone sells 2 billion condoms a year. That is a social enterprise. And that's going to churn back into making sure these programs are effective at scale all over the world. I mean, we work in 65 countries around the world. And, that is a business enterprise in itself. And we need to be smarter in how we go about doing business to helping the poor to come out of extreme poverty.
Well, in
business.
And one of the areas, right, has really been, you see it more, I think it's easier to quantify and to manage when it's in the climate change area, but you have green bonds, right? Much more of an investment in investment vehicles. There is a move, and there has been for some of these social impact bonds.
Yeah, we actually are working with bonds, and
it's harder, I think, as you sort of get outside of, with health and some other areas, like how do you really put these bonds together? Who's prepared to buy them? Can you get pension funds to invest? Because you can show, as you said, enough accountability and outcome.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the continued challenge. So it's an evolving area, one that everybody's discussing, and I think a continued work in progress, and probably where some of the financing will ultimately go, but the accountability and some of the pieces that go with that, I think, are going to have to be defined.
Exactly. Great question.
Other questions? Yes. Oh, wait, hold on. We need to get you a mic. And please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Anita Balan. I'm a second-year graduate student here, and my thesis advisor is Dr. Amita Vyas, and I'm working on the Girl
Lucky
Rising
you.
project. Yeah, I cannot, no words.
We feel the same way.
No, yeah, so let me ask by saying, this sounds incredible. We've heard amazing stories and success, but as somebody who's working as a program manager for a small non-for-profit organization and somebody from India, I would love to hear about any challenge that you came across while you were putting forth these projects and collaborations, and how you overcame those challenges, because I think we all know that it's not as simple as as we would like it to be, especially when it comes to collaborations and partnerships. Thank you for all panelists.
Christina.
Well, where do I start? There have been, when Girl Rising set out to work in the 3 countries where we're working, this was something we had never done before. We were filmmakers and journalists who knew really well how to make incredible stories, but this was new for us. We believed passionately, and we had the experience of creating content and architecting partnerships around it to make something happen. I think one of the biggest challenges we had, and what we underestimated the time that it would take to both localize messages and content, and really just to the time to work with partners and bring partners on board. We had other challenges in our work in northern Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of the Congo that had to do with everything from actually trying to get accurate local language materials. In India, from our networks that we had, we had already worked in India and created a part of the film in India, so we had trusted people on the ground. In northern Nigeria and the Congo, we didn't have a footprint, and we truly underestimated the kind of time it would take to really find and begin working well with local partners on the ground. So that, I would say, was one of our biggest. Also, in northern Nigeria in particular, there was a tremendous amount of time needed to just go through all of the appropriate kind of diplomatic steps one needs to within a community, going to visit the religious leaders, and you can't rush that part. I mean, we worked hard to work with trusted partners on the ground, but you still have to build in this time to be there, be present, and talk to all the right people to get the right kind of community buy-in.
I'll be very quick. Yeah, there was a very interesting challenge that I would say was our main challenge, and that is, my organization, PSI, has been around for 50 years, and, it's a global NGO. We're like the DHL of health delivery all over the world. And traditionally, we've received, hundreds of millions of dollars in grants from government organizations to do our work. I come along and say, oh, well, we're starting Maverick Collective. We're going to basically change the way philanthropy is being done and bring Mavericks to the table to bring both, time, talent, treasure. And we're going to change the way we work with donors. And we're not even going to call them donors anymore, because they're not just checkbooks, walking checkbooks. They can bring so much more to the table than just money. And so shifting that culture of whether it's a small NGO, I know Girl Rising probably suffers from this, like everyone's competing for the same dollar, everyone's aggressively fundraising, GW is fundraising, everyone is fundraising. But think about it for a second. If you change the way that you work with your partners and your donors to say, we value you more than your money, and we truly value what you have to say and what you have to bring to the table, which you often say but don't mean it. For me, that was one of the biggest challenges of getting my organization along with that ride of, we're going to put trust in the private philanthropists, and it has yielded hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's great. Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
So I think it's time for us to wrap up. We talked a lot today about, do we have time? Can we? Oh, I got the yes. We'll do one last question.
Be a good one, don't.
Okay, good.
I'm Megan Donahue. I just returned from Africa. I was regional advisor for Peace Corps, Let Girls Learn. And one thing that, I mean, what all of you are saying, thank you, because it's very important. At the grassroots level, and you've been kind of hinting about it, talking about it, but what do you do to address the gender construction in which that girl lives? You know, because it's, we can do all we want to do, right? But that girl is in a context. Yeah. So we can change that girl, but that girl goes back to mom and dad, or to the teachers, the classroom that she's in. Those teachers are under that gender construction. So do you have any stories about how you've done that? Any and all of you? Thanks.
Christina, I'm going to let you have the last.
I would be happy to. So when we work in communities, I would say our most successful work in communities is finding partners that not only work with girls, but critically with all of those other stakeholders that you talked about. So in northern Nigeria, not only did we work with Discovery Learning Alliance, who ended up putting our curriculum in schools, so it was reaching boys and girls, but we also worked with teachers and did teacher training. We had community screenings that parents would come to. We worked with local religious leaders. We had a 6-week session with male Muslim local religious leaders who would come once a week to watch the House of Language version of our modules and really just spark local discussion. One of the things we found really useful in our work, and what I was really curious about it when we started, was how will stories from far away be relevant to a community? Girls, whoever it is in the community, but will a story about a girl from Peru resonate with a teacher or a father in northern Nigeria? And what we found, and what our partners told us, is that actually, especially to get to the gatekeepers, stories from far away were a perfect place to start. Yes. It was like a safe way into the door that allowed those individuals to not feel judged or ashamed or even have to talk very much at first about the context there, but talk about that story of that girl in that faraway place and what she was facing. In answer to your question, you're absolutely right. We cannot be just talking to girls and trying to empower girls to stand up for themselves if we don't talk to their peers, the boys around them, as well as all of those in their universe, their fathers, their mothers, their teachers, their local leaders. Then we will not be able to move the needle as we want to. So that is what we are trying to do in these places, is find partners that are able to reach those other audiences around girls and the other people that are critical in her life.
And I'll add to what Christina was talking about with the Girl Rising India campaign and the schools program, which is a curriculum that's being implemented in 250 schools, reaching 40,000 kids. You know, we really are looking at the outcomes for young people, right? Sort of how are they changing their perceptions around gender and girls' empowerment, both boys and girls. But interestingly, as we started going into the schools and training the teachers to deliver the program, we started seeing significant changes in the teachers. Teachers who would say, of course, I treat boys and girls differently in my classroom. And then as they're going through and being trained to deliver this curriculum, they start reflecting on some of their own behaviors as parents, but also behaviors as teachers. You know, one story we often heard was, well, I didn't realize, but you know, after lunch, I asked the girls to clean up. I don't ask the boys to clean up at school. So it's this curriculum isn't just sort of changing and being focused on young people, but we're seeing sort of a change in the entire school environment, everything from teachers and school administrators. So again, I think that's one of the more powerful aspects of Girl Rising is this attention to gatekeepers. So thank you for bringing that up. So thank you everyone for being here with us today. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Candi. And you know, we talked a lot about issues that girls and women are facing around the world. And as we think about health, education, livelihood, gender inequalities are at the root of so many of the disparities that we see across all three of those sectors. But I hope that we also remember that here in the United States, we are also part of that global landscape, and that we too face significant gender-based discrimination and barriers, particularly when we think about gender-based violence, sexual assault on campuses. And so I think that as we innovate for girls around the world and think about gatekeepers around the world, we need to be doing the same thing here in the United States. So thank you, all of you, for joining us today.